Commander Kieran Blackwood stood rigidly at attention, his scarred face betraying no emotion as the Astrian Dominion's High Chancellor droned on about peace and reconciliation. The grand ceremonial hall on Nexus Station, a neutral territory, gleamed with artificial opulence, a stark contrast to the 5 years of brutal warfare that had left both civilizations bleeding. As a gesture of our commitment to this new era, the Chancellor's translator echoed, the crystalline voice failing to capture the subtle harmonic undertones of Astrian speech. We offer gifts to those humans who showed exceptional resilience and honor in battle. Kieran's jaw clenched. Gifts, a diplomatic word for what everyone knew was a calculated political maneuver and a humiliation. He'd only agreed to attend this farce of a ceremony because his superiors had ordered it. For the greater good, Admiral Hayashi had insisted, show them humanity can be gracious in victory. Some victory, 17 million dead on both sides. Commander Blackwood, the Chancellor called, 4 golden eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made the hair on Kieran's neck rise. Your tactical genius at the Battle of Vega 6 earned our respect. Please accept this offering. 2 Astrian guards approached, escorting a female of their species between them. Unlike the flowing ceremonial robes of the officials, she wore a simple tunic that couldn't hide her warrior's physique. Her scaled skin shimmered with suppressed rage, deep indigo with flecks of silver that caught the light as she moved. Most striking were her eyes, violet and defiant, locked on Kieran with unconcealed hatred. This is Talaris Vaenorin, former commander of the 7th Strike Fleet and daughter of House Norin, the Chancellor continued. She will serve you as companion and cultural liaison. Serve, another pretty word for an ugly truth. Kieran's stomach turned. Talaris was pushed forward, stumbling slightly before regaining her composure. Up close, Kieran could see the faint scarring around her neck where a control collar had recently been removed, for appearance's sake, no doubt. I don't want a slave, Kieran said flatly, loud enough for everyone to hear. The Chancellor's crest flared slightly, the Astrian equivalent of a frown. This is no slave, Commander. This is a sacred bond traditionally given to. Save it, Kieran interrupted. I know what this is. He turned to Talaris, speaking directly to her rather than about her. I'm sorry you're being used as a political pawn. You don't have to come with me. For the first time, surprise flickered across her alien features. When she spoke, her voice was low and musical, yet edged with steel. I have no choice, human. My family's honor depends on this arrangement. The translator couldn't quite capture the contempt in that last word. The ceremonial hall had gone silent, diplomats from both sides watching the exchange with varying degrees of horror and fascination. Kieran knew he was causing an incident, but couldn't bring himself to care. Fine, he finally said, but understand this, you're not my property. The journey from the ceremonial hall to Kieran's ship, the Wayfarer, passed intense silence. Talaris followed 3 steps behind him, the posture of a subordinate, but her gaze burned into his back. The docking bay bustled with activity as ships prepared to depart, the peace conference concluding, dignitaries returning to their worlds. This is it, Kieran gestured to his vessel, a modified long-range scout ship. Nothing fancy, but it was his, purchased with combat pay after his discharge had been processed. Not as grand as your Dominion cruisers, I imagine. Talaris glanced at the ship, then back to him. I expected to be housed in your quarters, Commander. Is that not the custom when accepting a gift? The bitter emphasis on the last word wasn't lost on Kieran. There are 2 cabins, he replied, punching in the access code. Small but private, you'll have your own. The airlock hissed open. After you. She hesitated as if searching for the trap in his words. When she finally stepped aboard, her movements were fluid but guarded, like a predator entering unknown territory. The ship's interior was utilitarian but clean, a small common area with a kitchenette, 2 narrow corridors leading to the sleeping quarters, and the cockpit visible through an open doorway. Why are you doing this? Talaris suddenly asked, turning to face him fully. Doing what? Kieran busied himself with the pre-flight checks. Pretending this false kindness, her translator struggled to convey the complex emotions in her voice. I've studied your kind, I know what humans do with war prizes. Kieran looked up, meeting her violet eyes. I've spent 5 years fighting your people. I've killed more Astrians than I can count. I've watched friends die screaming under your sonic weapons. He paused, the memories threatening to overwhelm him. I've had enough of treating each other as anything less than sentient beings. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but recalculation. Rest, Kieran said, turning back to the controls. Tomorrow we begin the journey to Earth. It's a long flight. As he watched her retreat to the cabin he'd indicated, back straight and head held high despite everything, Kieran wondered what cosmic joke had led him here, responsible for the one thing he'd never wanted. ownership of another living soul. 3 days into their journey, the silence aboard the Wayfarer had become its own presence, heavy and oppressive. Talaris emerged from her cabin only when necessary, her movements graceful yet tense like a compressed spring. Kieran had given her space, focusing on navigating the complex interstellar routes that would take them to Earth. "We need to make a stop," Kieran announced over breakfast, a simple affair of synthesized protein and hydrated fruit. Outpost Epsilon refueling and supplies. Talaris looked up from her untouched food, a human outpost. Mixed settlement started as a mining colony, now it's complicated, he paused. There will be both humans and Astrians there, not everyone's happy about the peace. Her violet eyes narrowed. "Are you warning me or yourself, Commander?" "Kieran," he corrected, "and both, I suppose." For the first time, something almost like amusement flickered across her features. "You are strange, human. Your kind wins the war, yet you act as though you are the defeated." "Nobody won this war," Kieran replied, rising to his feet. "We just stopped losing." The outpost came into view through the viewport, a sprawling collection of domes and angular structures clinging to the surface of a moon that orbited a gas giant. Lights twinkled through atmospheric shielding, giving the settlement an ethereal glow against the void of space. "Outpost Epsilon Control, this is Wayfarer requesting docking clearance," Kieran transmitted. A gruff voice responded almost immediately. "Identify occupants and purpose, Wayfarer." "Commander Kieran Blackwood, formerly of Earth Fleet. Civilian transport now, one passenger Astrian," he hesitated. "Here for supplies and refueling only." A long pause followed. "Docking approved, Bay 17, security detail will meet you, standard procedure for mixed company." Talaris's posture stiffened at the thinly veiled hostility in the controller's voice. "You should stay aboard," Kieran suggested as he guided the ship toward the designated bay. "And cower like a prisoner," pride flashed in her eyes. "I was commanding battleships while you were still learning to aim, human." "Have it your way," Kieran said with a shrug, though concern nagged at him. "But stay close." The security detail that met them consisted of 2 humans and an Astrian, all wearing the gray uniforms of outpost security, but the tension between them was palpable. The Astrian officer's crest flattened when he saw Talaris, recognition and shock evident in his posture. "Commander Vaenorin," he asked in their native tongue, the translator catching the words with a slight delay. Talaris stiffened but gave a slight nod. The security officer's 4 eyes darted between her and Kieran, clearly struggling to make sense of their relationship. "You are his." Before Talaris could respond, Kieran stepped forward. "She's her own, we're traveling together." Their escort through the station's main concourse drew stares from all directions. Humans whispered behind their hands, while Astrians clicked their tongue teeth in what Kieran recognized as their expression of disbelief or disgust. "Collaborator," hissed a human woman as they passed a crowded cantina. "House Trader," came an Astrian's harmonic murmur from the opposite direction. Talaris walked with her head high, but Kieran noticed how her scaled fists clenched at her sides. The indigo of her skin darkening with what he'd learned was the Astrian equivalent of a flush. The marketplace was a chaotic blend of cultures, human vendors hawking exotic wares beside Astrian craftsmen displaying crystalline sculptures and vibrating instruments. Despite the peace treaty, the 2 groups remained distinctly separated, an invisible line dividing the circular plaza. "I'll get the supplies," Kieran said. "Wait here if you want." Talaris shook her head, scanning the crowd warily. Separation is tactically unsound in hostile territory. A ghost of a smile touched Kieran's lips. Agreed. They had nearly finished gathering their supplies when trouble found them. A burly human with a prosthetic leg blocked their path, 2 equally imposing companions flanking him. "Blackwood," the man growled, "heard you were at Vega 6. Kieran tensed, recognizing the insignia tattooed on the man's neck, 43rd Drop Infantry. "I was. My brother wasn't so lucky, died when the Astrian flagship opened fire on our medical transports." His gaze shifted to Talaris, hatred burning in his bloodshot eyes. "And now you're keeping one as a pet." "Walk away, soldier," Kieran warned, shifting subtly to place himself between the man and Talaris. The man spat on the ground. "Traitor, you should have let them all burn when we had the chance." Talaris moved with startling speed, stepping around Kieran. "Your brother," she said, her translator struggling with her intensity, "died because your generals used medical ships to transport prototype sonic disruptors." Her crest rose in challenge. "I know, I was the one who discovered the deception." The revelation hung in the air for a heartbeat before the man lunged forward with a roar of rage. Kieran moved to intercept him, but Talaris was faster, a fluid sidestep followed by a precise strike to the man's solar plexus that left him gasping on his knees. His companions reached for concealed weapons, but froze as Kieran drew his sidearm in one smooth motion. "This ends here," he said, voice deadly calm. "We didn't survive a war just to kill each other in some backwater market." Security arrived moments later, separating the groups with practiced efficiency. The incident report was filed and dismissed with suspicious speed. No one wanted to deal with the complications of interspecies violence so soon after the peace treaty. Back aboard the Wayfarer as the outpost shrank in the viewport, Talaris broke the silence. "You defended me." Kieran finished setting the autopilot before responding. "You defended yourself, I just provided backup." Not many humans would draw weapons against their own kind for an Astrian. Not many Astrians would reveal classified intelligence to protect a human, he countered. A moment of understanding passed between them, neither comfortable nor entirely uncomfortable. Later that night, as Kieran checked the ship's systems before retiring, he found Talaris in the common area, meticulously cleaning a small, intricate device. "What's that?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "A kinetic memory, like your photographs but with sensation and scent." She pressed a small button and a holographic image appeared, a younger Talaris standing beside an older female Astrian, both in formal military attire. "My mother," she explained, voice softening, "before the war, before everything." Kieran sat across from her, respecting the invisible boundary between them. "She would be proud of how you've handled yourself." Would she? Talaris's gaze remained fixed on the image. "I am here alive while so many are not, accepting the hospitality of an enemy." "Former enemy," Kieran corrected gently, "and sometimes survival is its own kind of victory." For the first time since their meeting, Talaris looked directly at him without hostility or suspicion, just weariness and a question neither of them was ready to answer. What came after survival? As the Wayfarer continued its journey through the star-speckled void, something fragile began to form in the space between them. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of it. The vast emptiness of space stretched before them as the Wayfarer entered the final leg of their journey to Earth. What had begun as silent coexistence had evolved into something resembling a routine. Talaris had started joining Kieran for meals without prompting, occasionally offering insights about Astrian culture or asking measured questions about human customs. Today, she watched with unconcealed curiosity as Kieran performed maintenance on his cybernetic left hand, a sophisticated replacement for what he'd lost during the war. "Your prosthetic," she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "It was our technology." Kieran flexed the metal fingers, watching as synthetic tendons shifted beneath the surface. "Salvaged from an Astrian battlecruiser we captured. Ironic, isn't it?" "How did you lose it?" She leaned closer, her scales shifting from indigo to a lighter blue, a sign of genuine interest that Kieran had come to recognize. He hesitated. They had carefully avoided discussing personal combat experiences, maintaining the fragile peace between them. But something in her tone suggested she truly wanted to understand. "Orbital assault on Nova Centauri," he finally said. "My squad was pinned down in the agricultural sector. Astrian commander had orders to hold at all costs." His eyes grew distant. "A thermal charge took my hand, half my squad. I kept firing." Talaris's crest flattened against her head. Respect, he had learned, not aggression. "That was the third offensive. I lost my mate there." The revelation landed between them like a physical weight. Kieran stared at her, suddenly seeing the faint silvery lines across her neck and shoulders that weren't just decorative markings, but scars, ritual grief markings that Astrian warriors carved into their own flesh when mourning their fallen. "I'm sorry," he said simply, knowing no other words would suffice. She nodded once, acknowledging but not dwelling. "He believed in the war, I believed in him." Her four-fingered hand traced one of the scars absently. "Afterward, I began to question. That is when my troubles began." A proximity alert interrupted the moment, the ship's console flashing with warning lights. "Ion storm," Kieran announced, moving quickly to the controls. "A big one." Talaris immediately shifted to the co-pilot seat, instinctively reaching for the navigation controls. She paused, looking to Kieran for permission. "You know how to fly this class of ship?" he asked, already engaging the shields. "I've commandeered enough of them," she replied with what might have been the ghost of a smile. Kieran nodded. "Take nav, I'll handle shields and power distribution." The storm hit with shocking intensity, waves of charged particles battering the shields, alarms blaring as systems overloaded. Together they worked in perfect synchronization, as if they'd been flying together for years instead of days. When the primary stabilizers failed, Talaris compensated with a series of manual adjustments that kept them from spinning into the heart of the storm. "Port engine's overheating," Kieran called over the din. "We need to shut it down before it blows." "We'll lose maneuverability," Talaris countered, her hands flying over the controls. "Better than losing the ship," he shot back, already initiating the shutdown sequence. The Wayfarer lurched violently as one engine died, throwing Kieran from his seat. He hit the bulkhead with bruising force, pain lancing through his ribs. Talaris held steady at the controls, navigating on one engine with a skill that few could match. Minutes stretched into an hour before they finally emerged from the storm, the ship limping on minimal power. Silence fell as the alarms quieted, leaving only the sound of their labored breathing. "That," Talaris said finally, "was not in your flight plan." A laugh escaped Kieran despite the pain in his side, the absurdity of her deadpan observation breaking the tension. To his surprise, she joined him, her laughter a melodic trill that he'd never heard before. Something shifted between them in that moment, barriers crumbling that had nothing to do with the damaged ship. "We need to make repairs," he said once they'd recovered. "There's a salvage station not far from here." As Talaris helped him to his feet, her hand lingered on his arm longer than necessary. "You're injured." "Bruised ribs may be nothing serious," he winced as he straightened. "Let me see, it wasn't a request." In the small medical bay, Kieran reluctantly removed his shirt, revealing a tapestry of old scars across his torso, burn marks, shrapnel wounds, and now a spreading bruise along his left side. Talaris examined him with clinical precision, her cool scaled fingers probing gently. "Two fractured ribs," she concluded. "You need binding." As she worked, Kieran noticed a jagged scar running across her shoulder blade, disappearing beneath her tunic. "And that?" he asked softly. Her hand stilled momentarily. "The price of questioning orders. When I discovered your medical ships were carrying weapons, I reported it through proper channels. My superiors disagreed with my assessment that this violated war conventions." "You were punished for doing the right thing," Kieran said, understanding dawning. "That's why they gave you to me, not as an honor but as exile." "My house was once respected," she confirmed, finishing the bandage. "Now it is disgraced. My father hoped that by gifting me to a decorated human commander, some honor might be salvaged." Kieran caught her wrist as she withdrew, the contact sending an unexpected current between them. "You have more honor than any Astrian I've met." Her violet eyes met his, searching. "And you, Kieran Blackwood, are not what I expected of a human warrior." Later, as they drifted in space waiting for systems to recover enough for the short jump to the salvage station, Talaris joined Kieran in the observation dome. Earth's sun was visible as a bright pinpoint in the distance. "Tell me of your home," she said, settling beside him on the narrow bench, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her scaled skin. He described the small coastal town where he'd grown up, the family he'd lost in the early days of the war when Astrian forces had bombarded civilian centers. Rather than accusation, his words carried only the weight of memory. "I had a sister," he said, showing her a worn photograph he kept in his pocket. "Maya, she was studying xenobiology. She would have loved to meet you to learn about your people without the context of war." Talaris touched the photograph with reverent fingers. "In another life, perhaps we would have met differently." "Maybe we still can," Kieran said, the words surprising them both. "Start again, I mean, not as enemies, not as whatever they tried to make us." She was silent for a long moment, the stars reflecting in her eyes. "What would we be then?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'd like to find out." When her hand found his in the darkness of the observation dome, neither acknowledged it aloud. This tentative connection forming between two beings who had every reason to hate each other, yet found themselves traveling toward something else entirely. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving only the clear path of stars before them, and somewhere ahead, the uncertainty of a world that might not be ready for what they were becoming to each other. Earth's atmosphere shimmered around the Wayfarer as they descended through wispy clouds toward the sprawling coastal city below. 2 months had passed since their arrival on Kieran's homeworld, 2 months of cautious adaptation and growing closeness that neither had dared to name. "It's beautiful," Talaris murmured, her violet eyes wide as she took in the vista of ocean meeting land, the rebuilt skyline glinting in the afternoon sun. After the destruction of the war, humanity had rebuilt with determination, structures of glass and reclaimed materials rising like defiant fingers toward the sky. "Northern California," Kieran explained, guiding the ship toward the civilian landing port. What's left of it anyway? The Istrian bombardment missed this area mostly. He regretted the words as soon as they left his mouth, but Talaris merely nodded. They had moved beyond assigning blame. "Will your people accept my presence here?" she asked, her normally confident voice tinged with rare uncertainty. Kieran glanced at her, at the proud set of her shoulders, the way she'd adapted her traditional Istrian attire to incorporate elements of human clothing. A warrior still, but something more now. "They'll adjust," he said with more confidence than he felt. "We have the official clearance from both governments. You're here legally as a cultural liaison." The term felt hollow, but it was the designation they'd agreed upon with the authorities, better than gift or prize. The landing was smooth, but the reception waiting for them was not. A small crowd had gathered near the security checkpoint, a mix of curious onlookers and protesters holding signs with slogans like "No Alins on Earth" and "Remember the Fallen." "Charming," Talaris remarked dryly as they disembarked, her scales shifting to a deeper indigo, her response to stress. Kieran moved closer to her, instinctively protective. "Ignore them." Security officers created a pathway through the crowd, but couldn't block the jeers and hostile stares. One man broke through, coming face to face with Talaris. "My son died fighting your kind," he snarled. Before Kieran could intervene, Talaris met the man's gaze steadily. "As did my brother fighting yours," she replied, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of grief that the translator couldn't quite capture. "I honor both their sacrifices by seeking peace now." The simple dignity of her response seemed to disarm the man. He stepped back, confusion replacing rage in his expression. Later, in the modest apartment Kieran had arranged near the ocean, Talaris stood by the window watching waves crash against the shore, her silhouette outlined by the setting sun. 3 moons hung in the sky, Earth's natural satellite alongside 2 smaller Istrian moons that had been captured in orbit as part of the peace arrangement, a symbolic sharing of celestial bodies. "You handled that well," Kieran said, joining her at the window. "I've had practice being hated," she replied without bitterness. "First by my own people for questioning the war, now by yours for participating in it." Kieran's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, human and Istrian, 5 digits against 4. She no longer flinched at his touch. "Not everyone feels that way," he said softly. She turned to him, the fatting light accentuating the elegant lines of her face, the subtle shimmer of her scales. "No, not everyone." The kiss when it happened was tentative, exploratory, the meeting of 2 species never meant to find intimacy with each other. Her skin was cooler than a human's, smoother, but her lips were surprisingly soft against his. When they parted, Talaris's scales had shifted to a luminescent pale blue that Kieran had never seen before. "I didn't think this was possible," she whispered, her crest rippling with emotion. "Neither did I," he admitted, brushing his thumb along the curve of her jaw. "But here we are." That night, as they discovered each other with gentle curiosity, human warmth against Istrian coolness, smooth skin against delicate scales, the war seemed to belong to another lifetime entirely. Their fragile peace lasted 3 weeks. The summons came at dawn, an urgent notification from the Joint Human-Istrian Security Council requesting their immediate presence. The man who delivered it wore the uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, but his eyes were cold as they lingered on Talaris. "What's this about?" Kieran demanded, scanning the official document. "Security matter," the messenger replied curtly, "highest priority." In the gleaming council chamber, representatives from both species sat in tense silence. Admiral Hayashi, Kieran's former commanding officer, rose to address them. "Commander Blackwood, we have received disturbing intelligence from our Istrian counterparts," he began without preamble. "They claim that Talaris Vaenorin possesses classified military information that was not meant to be shared with Earth forces." An Istrian official, her elaborate robes marking her as a high counselor, spoke next, her translator conveying the accusation with mechanical precision. "Subject Vaenorin had access to battle plans and defense codes before her reassignment. We have reason to believe she may be using her current position to gather intelligence on Earth's remaining military capabilities." "That's absurd," Kieran cut in. "Talaris has done nothing but—" "We have evidence," interrupted another human official, sliding a data pad across the table. "Encrypted transmissions sent from your location to an Istrian frequency." Kieran stared at the data, then at Talaris, whose expression had gone carefully blank, the warrior's mask she wore when threatened. "This is a mistake," he insisted. "Is it?" The Istrian counselor's crest raised in challenge. "Perhaps you've been too close to your gift to notice her true purpose." The implication hung in the air, causing murmurs among the council members. Kieran felt heat rise to his face, not embarrassment but anger. "Careful, counselor," he warned. "You're making accusations without proof." "We have proof enough to demand her immediate return to Astrian custody," the counselor replied. "House Norin has formally requested her repatriation. Her father awaits." The revelation struck Talaris visibly. "My father," for the first time since Kieran had known her, uncertainty crept into her voice. "He wishes to see me." "To rehabilitate you," the counselor corrected. "To restore what honor can be salvaged after your inappropriate relations with a human." Kieran moved to stand beside Talaris, his hand finding hers beneath the table. "This isn't about security or honor," he said flatly. "This is about control. Someone doesn't like the idea of peace actually working." Admiral Hayashi frowned. "Commander, you're overstepping." "Am I?" Kieran challenged. "Two former enemies finding common ground, learning to trust each other. That's exactly what the treaty was supposed to accomplish. Unless the treaty was just for show and both sides still want their Cold War." A tense silence fell over the chamber. "The council will deliberate," Hayashi finally announced. "Until then, Talaris Vaenorin is restricted to Earth under supervision. You are both dismissed." Outside the council building, rain fell in sheets, mirroring the storm brewing between them. Talaris walked ahead, her posture rigid, scales dark with emotion. "You believe them," Kieran realized as they reached the covered transport station. She turned, rain glistening on her scales. "My father was the one who ordered my gift-giving, to say he now wants me back." "Could be a lie," Kieran finished for her. "Or could be truth," she countered. "What if he truly wishes to restore my honor, my place among my people?" "Is that what you want?" The question emerged more sharply than he intended. Before she could answer, movement caught Kieran's eye, a glint of metal from a rooftop across the street. Military instinct took over. He lunged forward, tackling Talaris to the ground as an energy blast seared the air where she had been standing. "Sniper," he shouted, rolling them both behind a concrete barrier. Two more shots followed, scorching the pavement. Not standard military issue, these were Astrian disruptors modified for silent operation. "This way," Talaris hissed, pulling him toward a maintenance access tunnel. Once inside, she pressed him against the wall, her eyes scanning him for injuries. "Are you hit?" "No, you." Grazed, she showed him a burn along her upper arm, the scales blackened but the wound superficial. Kieran's mind raced. "Someone's trying to eliminate us both, this isn't random." "The transmissions they found," Talaris said, understanding dawning. "Someone planted them to frame me, to drive us apart." "But why?" Her eyes met his, the violet depths troubled. "Because together, we represent something dangerous, proof that humans and Astrians can do more than tolerate each other. We can love each other," Kieran finished softly, the word they'd both avoided until now. In the dim light of the maintenance tunnel, as distant sirens wailed above, Talaris pressed her forehead to his, an intimate gesture among her people. "Yes," she whispered, "and that terrifies those who profit from our division." Later that night, hidden in a safe house Kieran had established during his military days, they pieced together what little they knew. The assassins could have been from either side or both. "We need to find out who's behind this," Kieran said, cleaning Talaris's wound with gentle hands. "And then," she asked, watching him with eyes that held both vulnerability and determination. He met her gaze steadily. "Then we decide our own fate, not Earth's, not the Dominion's, ours." As they held each other in the darkness, both knew that tomorrow would force choices neither had imagined making. The path forward was uncertain, dangerous, but for the first time they would walk it together, bound not by treaty or obligation, but by something far more powerful and fragile. Dawn broke over the San Francisco Bay, painting the water in shades of amber and gold. From their hiding place in an abandoned pre-war building overlooking the harbor, Kieran and Talaris watched as military vessels, both human and Astrian, patrolled the waters. "They're looking for us everywhere," Kieran noted, lowering his binoculars. "Joint operation, at least they're cooperating on something." Talaris stood beside him, her tall form silhouetted against the window. In the 3 days since they'd fled the assassination attempt, she'd worn a hooded cloak to conceal her distinctive Astrian features whenever they ventured out. Now, in the privacy of their hideout, her scales gleamed their natural indigo in the morning light. "I accessed the secure channel last night," she said. "My father has indeed arrived on Earth, leading the Astrian delegation searching for me." Kieran turned to her, studying the complex emotions playing across her alien features. "Do you want to see him?" She was silent for a long moment. "He is the only family I have left, but I don't know if he comes as my father or as an agent of those who wish to silence us." The previous day, they had broken into a secure terminal and discovered fragments of communications between high-ranking officials on both sides, discussions about containment of the situation and eliminating security risks. Their relationship had been deemed a dangerous precedent that threatened carefully maintained tensions. Peace is bad for business, Kieran had realized. War profiteers exist in both our species. Now, looking at the woman he had come to love against all odds, he faced the hardest question of all. If we run, we'll never stop running, but if we stay and fight, we need to know what we're fighting for. Talaris crossed to him, her movement fluid and graceful. She placed a four-fingered hand against his cheek. I have already chosen. Your people. You are my people now, she said simply. But I need to know if my father stands with those who would see us dead or if he can be trusted. Kieran covered her hand with his own, then we'll find out together. The plan they devised was dangerous, perhaps suicidal, but neither saw another path forward. Using Kieran's old military contacts, they arranged a meeting with Talaris's father in neutral territory, the memorial garden built on the former battlefield of Golden Gate Park, where both human and Astrian dead had been buried side by side in a symbolic gesture of reconciliation. As dusk fell, they approached cautiously, Kieran's hand never far from his concealed weapon. The garden was eerily beautiful, luminescent plants from both worlds growing together, their light casting ethereal patterns across stone monuments. A solitary figure waited near the central fountain, an older Astrian male, his scales faded to a pale blue with age, his aristocratic bearing unmistakable even at a distance. Beside him stood a single human guard wearing the insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps. Father, Talaris called softly, stepping into the light. The elder Astrian's crest rippled with emotion, relief perhaps, or sorrow. Daughter, I feared I would not see you again in this life. Why are you here? She asked, keeping a careful distance. Did you come to bring me home in chains? I came because I received word you were in danger, he replied, his translator failing to capture the depth of feeling in his harmonics. From those who fear what you represent. Kieran stepped forward, placing himself protectively beside Talaris. And what exactly does she represent, counselor? The elder Vaenoran studied him with ancient eyes. Hope, he said simply, a future without hatred. My daughter always saw further than those blinded by war. The assassination attempt, Talaris pressed. The claims I've been spying. Fabrications, her father confirmed. Created by a coalition of those who profit from our mutual distrust. Arms manufacturers, political extremists, those whose power would diminish in true peace. The human guard stepped forward. We've identified conspirators on both sides. Admiral Hayashi is among them. Kieran felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. My own commanding officer. The same people who orchestrated the violations of war conventions, Talaris realized, using medical ships to transport weapons. Creating justifications for escalation, her father finished. Yes, they have been working together across species lines while encouraging hatred between our peoples. Why tell us this now? Kieran demanded. Why not expose them? Without proof, we would be eliminated before we could speak, the elder Astrian replied. But together, a human war hero and an Astrian noblewoman, your testimony could break their power, if you are willing to stand before both our peoples. Talaris looked to Kieran, a silent question in her eyes. He nodded once. We are, she declared. A sudden movement from the shadows was their only warning. Kieran reacted instantly, shoving Talaris aside as a disruptor blast cut through the air. The human guard fell with a cry, clutching his shoulder. Ambush, Kieran shouted, drawing his weapon. 3 attackers emerged from different directions, 2 human, 1 Astrian, all wearing stealth gear without insignia, cooperating even in their treachery. What followed was chaos. Kieran and Talaris moved in perfect synchronization, covering each other's vulnerabilities as they had learned to do. Her father, despite his age, proved himself a warrior still, disarming 1 attacker with a series of precise strikes. The wounded guard managed to activate an emergency beacon, but Kieran knew reinforcements would come too late. One of the humans aimed a disruptor at Talaris's back as she grappled with the Astrian assassin. No, Kieran lunged forward, taking the blast meant for her. Searing pain exploded through his chest as he fell, the world blurring around him. Through dimming vision, he saw Talaris move with terrifying speed, her warrior's training evident in every motion as she incapacitated both remaining attackers. Then she was kneeling beside him, her cool hands pressing against his wound, her voice breaking as she called his name. Stay with me, she pleaded, her scales shifting to pale blue fear he had learned, not grief. Not yet. Kieran, please. He tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. Above them, the night sky revealed stars and the twin Astrian moons hanging beside Earth's larger satellite.